Top 10 90s Horror Movies. The 90s are often seen as a fairly anemic time for horror movies by horror fans, and there are also a sizable number of old-school horror fans who hate the post-Scream late 90s run of teen horror flicks. Tough shit for that crowd however, because this ain't gonna be one of those videos. I had a ball with those movies personally, and at least some of them will be on this list, so no. Top 10 90s Horror Movies. 10. From Dusk Till Dawn. This gloriously over-the-top mid-90s flick that turned George Clooney into a movie star, but don't hold that against it. From Dusk Till Dawn's appeal lies on the basis of its two movies for the price of one gimmick, with the first half being a tense, Tarantino-esque crime thriller in which a family are held hostage by two hoodlums in their mobile home and forced to help them cross the border, and a second half which turns into a fantastically lurid and campy gore-filled vampire action horror. Deranged, in the best possible way. 9. Child's Play 2. Chucky's back for an encore in this early 90s sequel to the late 80s horror classic, amping up the gore and the fun for his second outing in a film that's every bit as entertaining today as it was 27 years ago. 8. Silence of the Lambs. Some of the effectiveness of this film has been worn away over time simply because of how often it has been copied, emulated and just plain shamelessly ripped off. The serial killer, a virtually unknown pop culture entity in 1990, have even got their own weekly TV shows these days with the likes of Criminal Minds, not alone endless movie copycats, so the fact that Silence of the Lambs still stands up as well as it does is something of a testament to what a well-crafted piece of cinema this is. Director Jonathan Demme does sterling work, as do Anthony Hopkins and the lovely Jodie Foster. A classic. 7. Ghostwatch. Yes, alright, it's a TV movie but I'm including it anyway because fuck you. A found footage type genre piece before the term was even invented. This controversial 1992 BBC gem sees a Halloween special hosted by celebrities like Michael Parkinson, Sarah Greene and Red Dwarf's Craig Charles, intended as a light-hearted investigation into a family whose house is supposedly being haunted. Goes decidedly tits up and apparently scared half of Britain shitless at the time, convincing many people it was real in an Orson Welles War of the World kind of way, and getting the BBC into terrible trouble. Tee-hee chuckle guffaw titter. The case at the center of the plot is clearly based on the infamous supposedly real Enfield haunting, which was of course also used as the basis for the recent Conjuring 2, but the sheer inventive cheek of Ghostwatch's use of it takes some beating in the chutzpah stakes. Even watched decades later, knowing full well it was all a load of steaming hot spur, it still managed to give me the willies. Rather wonderful. 6. Mimic. This late 90s horror is very underrated in my opinion, and indeed I'm going to risk a public lynching, not that that's ever stopped me before, haha, and say that this is actually my favorite film that Guillermo del Toro or whatever his name is has ever made. The gorgeous Mira Sorvino battles against a mutant strain of insect she helped create to combat a deadly virus being carried by cockroaches, only to find the cure may be worse than the disease. Mimic is cool, stylish and scary, and a fantastic big bug horror flick and 90s classic. 5. Wolf. Wolf. Jack Nicholson is a tired middle-aged book editor who finds he's been replaced at work and in the marital bed by his backstabbing young protege, a slimy James Spader, who becomes as creepy as hell by the end. An accident on a lonely, icy country road that results in a bite from an apparent wolf sees him unexpectedly regain his spark and drive, and he sets out to win back his job, destroy his treacherous protege and win the affections of a much younger woman, Michelle Pfeiffer. But every silver lining comes with a cloud. This 1994 werewolf flick is more of a supernatural drama, thriller than an out-and-out horror flick, and was deliberately old-fashioned even then, but I've always thoroughly enjoyed it and found it very underrated. The leads are all great, with a fine supporting cast including Christopher Plummer and David Hyde Pierce, and Spot A, just Capri Friends David Schwimmer in a small role as a cop. Well made, well acted and just a good story, well told. 4. Urban legend. Students at a prestigious university start getting knocked off by a serial killer in the manner of notorious urban legends. One of the post-Scream run of late 90s teen slashers, Urban Legend does not seem particularly popular, but I've always rather liked it. It has a nicely camp, sinister atmosphere, a quality cast of fresh faces and old stalwarts including John Neville and Robert Englund, whose delivery of Something I Can Help You With is deliciously faux creepy ham-tastic, and the Urban Legends gimmick also works pretty well. The climax is a bit of a disappointment, the reveal of the killer and the motive for it all is fine, but the performance is well OTT and turns it into a cartoon, but I always find this a very easy and fun watch. Call it a guilty pleasure, but this is a film that has immense rewatch value and one of my faves of the 90s. 3. Halloween H2O. Halloween H2O. It is 20 years since madman Michael Myers brought terror to the small town of Haddonfield on one bloody Halloween night. Now survivor Laurie Strode, Jamie Lee Curtis, still traumatized by the events of that night and still obsessed with the idea that Michael might still be alive and may one day return to finish what he started, is working under an assumed name as the headmistress of a secluded private school far away from her old hometown. But now, on the exact 20th anniversary of the massacre, as a school trip just leaves a handful of students and skeleton staff at the school, Laurie's worst nightmare is about to become reality. Halloween H2O is unpopular with a certain breed of horror fan, the type mentioned earlier on, because a 90s horror movie having a 90s style instead of a 70s one is clearly too horrific to contemplate. But that's bad news for them and no one else, I guess. Cause I fricking love this movie and after a recent viewing still do. Classic 90s sequel to the original Halloween and Halloween 2, both of which were set on the same night, that remains as enjoyable, scary and entertaining as ever. I really enjoy this and it's still a big favorite. 2. The Frighteners. Michael J. Fox is a psychic investigator conman who makes a living out of ghost-busting haunted houses, when he's actually in cahoots with the ghosts. But his neat little scam plunges him into a dark mystery when a wave of mysterious deaths strike his community, seemingly caused by a sinister spectral figure that resembles death itself. This mid-90s comic fantasy horror from director Peter Jackson is a hugely entertaining film, probably Fox's best flick outside the BTTF trilogy. Jeffrey Combs is hilarious as a paranoid loony FBI agent who becomes almost as dangerous as the ghostly killer, and there's a peach of a role for genre favorite Dee Wallace Stone, the Howling, the mom in E.T., as a seemingly timid and cowed middle-aged woman who, in her teens, may or may not have assisted her older boyfriend to commit a mass spree killing. The true nature of the villain adding a dark and genuinely creepy edge to the otherwise Ghostbusters-esque tone. The Frighteners is a classic. 1. Scream. Of course, what else could it be? Scream is the daddy of 90s horror, essentially bringing the genre back from the nearly dead and doing it with great style, scares, humor and an attractive young cast. Wes Craven struck iconic gold with Freddy Krueger in the original Elm Street and he does it again with this awesome horror flick that stands up fantastically. I just can't believe it's over 2 decades old now, surely some mistake? So there you have it. My top 10 faves of 90s horror. There are others, of course, like Tremors, Sleepy Hollow, Bride of Chucky and more, but these are my absolute faves. List your own below.